Is that a new board?
Hmm?
Is that a new board?
No,
It's the same one.
it just looks different because it's on a small
It
table.
looks. I was going to say it looks so much smaller.
Well, it's the same one. It has even the sound effects are still in it that I never get to use, unfortunately.
Today's your day, man.
Today's
your day.
These are all drops from WQAM in Miami.
WIOD. Oh, I hate that station.
These are all the things I have on here.
I'm dying over here.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue.
The timing on these would be so hard.
I grew up listening to Neil Rogers. He was from Toronto on Miami AM radio.
Okay.
And I was bored in here one day and I just loaded the whole publicly used system with
I love that.
IOD and QAM bits. So shout out Neil Rogers. Rest in peace. Hello and welcome to Tech About Town, brought to you by Communitech and Elevate IP. I'm Alex Kinsella.
And I'm Allison Peel.
We have one of our favorite guests back in the studio 3 times.
Woohoo!
Our first 3-time guest,
Yep.
Mike Kirkup. Welcome to the show, co-founder of Elderella. So we have that episode. We'll link back to that one on the show notes as well, so in case you hadn't listened to that episode before. Today we're going to talk about something we've all experienced at some point, which is a failure in business. We all know something about some failures, and we learn lessons. I think we've all taken those into what we've done. No matter any lessons we learn, you're still going to make new mistakes. We're only human.
Absolutely.
So today we're here to learn a little bit about some of the lessons you've been sharing on LinkedIn about your experiences with Arlo, some of the mistakes that were made, and then how you're bringing those lessons and not repeating those mistakes with Elderella. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Very excited to be back. This is going to be a good one because it's not an easy process to share mistakes, especially when it's not your first startup. Like everybody's like, oh, it's your first startup. You make all these mistakes. You learn. It's like, okay, seriously. And you think you're not making the same mistakes again. You're like, no, I learned. And then they present themselves in slightly different clothing and you're like, get hook, line, sinkered for them again.
Well, and I think that's just the nature of building anything is you're into it. You're in the zone. You're focused on what you're doing. As the kids say, you're locked in on what you're building. And then sometimes you just don't see those mistakes. Like you said, they're just packaged a little bit differently. And you don't think to apply that lesson unless you can kind of take that 10,000 foot back step, right?
Yeah. And, there's also this like part of the process of like writing these things was helpful in that I seriously questioned whether I should still be in startup. Like it was like how many times do you keep trying this before you go, you're not good at this anymore, right? Or maybe you never were good at it. And so you kind of go through it. And I think the part of the process that, never really talked about before was just that it was cathartic to go, okay, there are tangible things that if you had to do it over again, you do it differently, and being able to actually see those for yourself. Because sometimes, like as you say, when you're right in the thick of it, you can't see that. And so I'm actually really thankful to have had a little bit of time to step back, and the posts have really resonated with quite a few people. I was surprised how many people would reach out over like LinkedIn or Twitter, or even just email and be like, hey, can you come and talk to our leadership team? Because we are literally having this exact problem right now. And I need them to understand what you're saying. So it's nice to know at least that other people will learn from some of the same mistakes.
Yeah, I think sometimes too, it's that external voice. Like you could have someone on your team saying, hey, I think we're doing this wrong. And it's like if you, like with kids, if you tell them, hey, you need to be doing X for hockey or ball or whatever, they won't listen to you, but they'll listen to a coach or they'll listen to someone else.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah, it's very cool. So yeah, it was a great experience, and 6 seemed to be the right number. I kind of capped it at 6, and it was the right amount of time. Like I felt like, spending more than a couple months looking backwards, things get a bit hazy. And that when I was running Velocity, that was one of the key things that we learned is that the best mentor you'll ever have is someone who's literally just 6 months ahead of you, because they know what it's like to be you, but they've been just a little bit further, so they can be like, this sucks, this is hard, this is easy, don't worry about this, you should really worry about this. But it hasn't gone so far that the conditions are totally different on the field or any of those things. Like I remember we brought Toby from Shopify in to speak one time, and someone's like, oh, how did you go to market? And he's like, don't ask me that question. Like we went to market in 2004, 2005. We used search engine marketing because no one was using search engine marketing. You can't use it now. That's a useless question.
Yeah.
Right. And so like that mentorship kind of part of just finding other startups who are just a little bit ahead of you and some of the other pieces really, really helpful.
I'm sure there's a lot of lessons that you learned, obviously, but what would you say, like before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about, you had said you did tons and tons and tons of interviews and you recorded them all. And then what happened?
Yeah, we did nothing.
Yeah.
Did nothing. Like brilliant. Invested in all these systems, like literally had both video and audio, had transcriptions, had all the stuff. And then my mental model was I wanted the rest of the team to be able to listen to calls if we needed to and hear it in the customer's voice and all those pieces. And, you know, some of the other people on my team would listen, but I never went back, not once. And my mental model around it was I was there.
Yeah.
Right. And yet you look back and you're like, I have this huge treasure trove of all of this data, of all the pieces of feedback, the questions they asked. What's the most common question? Why did they ask it?
Yeah.
How does our platform, you know, handle those situations? It never went back.
Why do you think you didn't go back?
I think in part because you're running as fast as you can. And so you're like, okay, well, that's not the problem, or that's not a place where I need to go, or I didn't have that kind of uncertainty. Partly, I think part of it, which leads into one of the other mistakes I made, was there are hard things in startups and there are easy things in startups. And it's really common to shy away from the really hard stuff. So in our case, it was just easier to build. We had this vision for what the future could look like, and then we had to bring it back to here's what we can build now. And we took the easy path on what we could build now, and no, this is the thing. Like, even though that's hard and it's gross and it's all those things, we should go do that because that's where they live. And so maybe just level set for people listening. Arlo was a solution for commercial lenders and brokers to be able to help them streamline the process. It's 2025. We're still, for most commercial loans, we are collecting all of that data over email, balance sheets, income statements, you know, certificates for, you know, incorporation and all these other pieces of documents that are sensitive, sending completely insecurely over email, and no one's tracking them. Humans have to then open them, double check them, make sure they're right, bank statements, everything. Like, it's crazy. Like, I met one customer who bought the product who had an entire department of people whose job was to open up bank statements all day, every day, and look at the bank statements. It's crazy. It's crazy, right? So we like sold them Arlo, and they're like, oh my gosh, this thing is amazing because it does all that lifting and analysis for us. We're going to move this team to something way more useful than just looking at bank statements.
Yeah.
But we didn't do the really hard integration that we avoided like the plague, was integrating into their CRM.
Right.
And that's because Salesforce is horrible to integrate into because every company is a snowflake. HubSpot is slightly better, but hardly anybody in that space used it. Almost all, it was about 75% was Salesforce. And then there's a smattering everybody else, everything from Pipedrive to I'm using a Google spreadsheet to whatever. And so we were just like, no, like, we'll give you an API. You can do the integration. Of course, no one ever did it. So we just avoided that really hard thing. And so part of the reason I don't know that I went back was I didn't really want to hear that I was avoiding pain points.
Okay.
Right? Like, cause you're just like, I don't need to go listen to that call for someone else to tell me that, you know, does this integrate into Salesforce? Does this integrate into Salesforce? No, it doesn't. We have an API. Like, I already knew all the answers. There wasn't anything to learn there, instead of probably really truly internalizing why doesn't it integrate into Salesforce?
Yeah. The API thing's an interesting one too. You make it an API available, but then you're depending on that team to do that work. Did that ever come up in that feedback where, like in those recordings where they're like, yeah, we don't want to do this?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like, they would be like, oh, okay, that's good to know. But they wouldn't be hiring a tech solution if they had a team would integrate and do all the stuff automatically for it. It felt almost like a bluff in a sense, right? Like, oh, well, here's an answer to your thing that I know you're never going to call me on, right? So yeah, there's silliness, really, to be honest. A poor set of decision making, but part of it also, when you kind of go back and you replay some of those calls and you think through some of the different pieces is, we thought what we had was really cool. And everybody would say it's really cool, but you'd get to the end of the call and you could tell that they were like, how do I integrate this into my workflow? Whether it's in the CRM or not, like this thing is wholly separate. And so now I have all these different steps that I have to do to be able to take advantage of it. And we integrated into their email by the end. And that's probably the number one use feature that people use now. It's like, no kidding. Like Arlo can just automatically send reminder emails to say, I still need these 3 documents. And salespeople love that because I don't want to send emails all day like that. Yeah. I'd rather do higher value things. And so, but it was really that avoiding it, I think was also part of it. I think the other side too is that it contrasts with the vision, right? So if you're like, hey, we're going to this agentic place and we're going to have all these essentially agents do all this heavy lifting. Like we're going to have a bank statement agent that analyzes it, and we're going to have a financial statement agent that does that. And there's going to be one that looks after your driver's license and goes and checks all these different things. And each of them are slightly like nuanced and intelligent, right? Like the driver's license is checking for things like, is it a temporary driver's license? Because you may not actually be a citizen in the country, in which case certain lenders can't lend to you. And those types of kind of like very nuanced scenarios. And we got like halfway there. And I think that's part of the challenge too, is that you're trying so hard to get to that place instead of making this place where you're currently at really, really work, even though that's the thing you have to take to market.
So almost like you were 2 steps ahead of the game, but not quite ready to be 2 steps ahead of the game.
Yeah. Like you, as a founder, the weirdest part of your brain is that you live in the future. You literally eat, breathe, sleep, something that's 3, 6, whatever months away. And then you have to kind of almost translate that back to people who live in the present to be like, no, just come with me on this journey. I can give you this and this breadcrumb to get us there. Mm-hmm. And when we get there, I think it's going to be truly amazing. And it may or may not actually be correct. And that's part of what you're trying to determine in those conversations. But that you have this almost disconnect in your brain because you're so constantly living in the future and not the present.
Yeah.
Well, part of what I've picked up just from talking to you and then reading the post is, you had some things that you knew the customers. Let me do that again. You had a couple features that you knew customers wanted. Then, like you said, the Salesforce integration was one you really needed to get done as kind of a foundational thing. How did like those conversations, like did you find, now looking back, did those throw you off where you're like, okay, if we build these things, we'll be okay, even though that foundational part wasn't quite done yet?
It's hard because at every step, so part of the challenge we had with Arlo is that we took an internal tool and we brought it out. And as an internal tool, it was integrated into our CRM. Like the sales team, when they were using it internally, it was integrated into HubSpot, had notifications, it did the stuff, right? And you're like, again, how did you not see this, right? But part of it was we could very quickly and very easily see the deficiencies in the system proper, right? Like when we first started, all it could do was analyze financial statements. That was it. And it was good at that, but it was not enough, because that was only a very small portion of the documents that people needed. And so we were getting very clear customer feedback to being like, no, I needed to accept more documents. I need to recognize more things. I need to do more analysis of that financial statement. I want ratios. I want these things. And so there was a very clear kind of pull and pathway towards, if you make the product better in these areas, then that makes it more likely that we're going to adopt it. And what we missed was, here's the workflow under which we will adopt it on this other kind of parallel path. And I think if we had gone and done a Salesforce integration right out of the gate, but didn't do those things, like if we had done the trade, we still wouldn't have gotten adoption, because they would have been like, okay, well, it doesn't do this. It doesn't support these documents. Like I need it to, like, it only does 10 or 20% of the documents I need. So like, let me know when you guys get there. And trying to do both of those wasn't possible in a short time period. So we said essentially no to this. Plus it was hard and annoying, no fun. And this was fun, right? Like, hey, we're like, with the cutting edge of AI, we're doing all these cool things. Like that's way more fun. So we skewed that way, thinking that the interface we had might be enough to bridge them there, but it certainly wasn't.
In terms of like the other lessons, like what's another one that kind of...
Oh, the product treadmill, man.
Yes. Yeah.
That one I think still hurts me the most. And I did it like right up till the end. So like in February, Anthropic announces Claude Code, which is essentially a command line tool that allows you to start building code. And my development team, I had 2 senior developers, and they're running full out, doing all code development the traditional way. And I'm losing deals in the pipeline because we're missing certain pieces of functionality, or, well, we really need this permission set, or, like kind of like outside the edge kind of important things, but enough that you're still early that you're like, okay, I need that feature. And so every time we hit one of those, I'm like, great. I pull Claude Code and I'd be like, let's go build this thing. And I started writing a ton of code, like a ton, like it was crazy. Claude Code and I were cranking out a ton of code. Some of it was complete garbage, right? Like I was making my senior developers review of it, and there's like sometimes they just shake their head and send it back, and lots of times it was good enough, right? And I think there's some complexity elements in there, and we can talk about some of the lessons that learned there too. But it then became very tangible to be able to, I can build that. Well, I just build that. Like you asked for it on Friday, I can build it on Monday, and that sensation of like, hey, we can be really responsive, we can turn around really fast, very much reminded me of like very early day startup goodness. Like I've seen velocity companies do this and do it really well. You have a meeting on Thursday, and by Friday morning that feature that you needed is shipped. People buy products that way, right? They're like, hey, they're responsive, they're listening. This is one of the things they can do that a big company can't. And it worked to some extent, but it didn't overcome getting people to actually use it as part of their day-to-day workflow. And so we're constantly being like, no, this next feature will be the one that makes the difference. This next feature will be the one. Instead of holistically stepping back and looking at the workflow and the adoption curve, and actually like sitting down and talking to people in more of a user interview to be like, how do you do your job? What does your day-to-day look like, right? When you wake up in the morning, what do you worry about? And we're doing that with Elderella. Like we've done now over 70 user interviews. We continue to get people to sign up. I think we'll probably do them forever. They're just so valuable. We never did that with Arlo because we thought we knew the problem because we did that job. We built the tool for ourselves. And so we're like, okay, well, everybody else must operate or roughly operates like we do. And so I don't need to use it, do a user interview to figure that out. And that's just honestly hubris, right? Like that's just ignorance.
I was just going to say back to the Claude Code comment, because you had said like you would just throw things in, and between you and Claude, you were like popping out. But then your senior engineers or developers were like, no. So what would you say to somebody who's in that situation, or maybe doesn't have the same developer skill set as someone who has done it for years or whatever? Good, bad, worth it, not worth it? How do you help them qualify using a tool like an AI tool to support dev building versus a human?
Yeah. So the ability to use some of these new command line tools or Cursor or whatever to build, I think it's just inevitable that it's how most people are going to write code, and everybody's going to figure out their own way. No different than if we sat down and said, what text editor are you using to build code 10 years ago? Yep. You'd get a different answer from most developers. Lots of people would use different things, and they'd be very passionate about why they cared about their specific one. And in the end, it didn't matter. As long as you knew your tool well and you used it well, great. I think what's changing now is that you're using natural language or English to be able to describe what's happening. Okay. The more you understand about architecture and how the AI works and all those other things, the better the chance you'll have of success of doing it well and doing it properly and building proper security in and all these other things. The challenge that Claude had back in February, which would be mitigated, I think, already by October, is the complexity of the system we had already built. Took a lot for it to internalize to then be able to provide key pieces of information, and to be able to change the code. And so the smaller the change, like a UI change, for example, was trivial. Like, hey, this is the wrong word here or there. That's also trivial for any developer, right? the more complicated for like, hey, we want to completely re-architect this entire thing. That was really, really hard at the time for Claude Code. And that's where it would just go off on its own path, write the wrong code. And then, the developers are like, no, you can't do that. That doesn't follow our patterns. That doesn't match this. And they would, give really good feedback, no different than they would to a normal junior developer. And I would literally screenshot the feedback and then dump it into Claude Code and be like, oh, that's really great feedback from Mo. And it would fix all of it. And then it would send a PR to change it. So it already back in, April, we started like a little bit in February, but March, April, May, it was getting quite good.
Going back on the doing customer interviews and like either ignoring them or learning from them. I remember years ago when I was at Thalmic and we did customer interviews, like we'd do a lot of them in person and the person would be like, yeah, I would never use this. I remember one, we interviewed a music producer. We went to his studio and he was showing us the board and it's like, 64 sliders and all this stuff. And we're talking about how he could use it. And he's like, yeah, I would never do this. And we went back and we're like, yeah, this is the feedback, right? How do you do that with your team, both at Arlo and now as you're thinking through Elderella, when you're told something in feedback, they're like, yeah, I would never actually do what you're building.
Yeah. So you have to listen. You're absolutely right. Full to Allison's comment about, how do you use tools now? Jackie and I have taken an approach at Elderella that like every time I go to do something manually, we're building a tool to do it. And so exactly to your point about customer interviews, am I going to go back and listen to all of them? Probably not, right? I know this about myself. I already have track record, so we should probably, be better. And so what we did is we still have all the recordings. We turn all those into transcripts. So we've got all the text. We then take an LLM and have it run against it, looking for pain points, content ideas, the things that we think are interesting out of it. And then that all goes into a gigantic database that we can then have a conversation with to ask questions. So I can literally, within 2 seconds, open up my laptop and go, what is the negative feedback customers have said about our product? And those will always just keep building. So literally every day it grabs new user interviews as Jackie or I do them and sticks them into the database, and then we can query across them. And so, I want to make sure that when I go and look at that, which I do almost every day now, I go, what are the biggest pain points? I want to be able to mentally check off, yes, I've got that, all of those covered well in the product. And if I don't, I have a very deliberate reason why I'm not doing that right now.
Yeah.
As a way to avoid the hard things.
Well, that's the one that, like, if there's feedback in there, let's just say whatever, it's you're building feature A, and that's you have it on the roadmap. This is a priority feature, and the feedback is overwhelmingly, we don't need that, or that's not going to solve my problem. How do you mentally deal with that? Because it's one of those, like, sometimes it's your baby, right?
Yeah.
So how do you kind of go?
Yeah, and I think that's the difference between Arlo and Elderella is I'm approaching this. I obviously have children and I spent a lot of time with my kids, and so I would consider myself a caregiver on some level, but I'm very fortunate in that my parents are relatively good health and I've never had to take care of them in any kind of meaningful way yet. And so I'm approaching this not from a position like I did in Arlo where it's like, well, I already did this job and I know what I'm doing and I know how we did it. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be a caregiver, and I'm listening to every one of these people. And so I don't feel like I have the right answer. And even just honestly, that mindset change of I'm not egotistical about it. I don't have the right answer and I'm listening makes such a huge difference. And so we don't build things in the first place that no one asked for, right?
Yeah.
Like, and sure, like there's some obvious enhancements. Like we have a medications portion in the product. And so when you add in new medications, one of the pieces of feedback that one of our users had in the interview was, I can't ever tell the brand name versus the medical name, and it's so confusing. And it's generic. I don't understand these things. And then I'm confused, and I'm in there, and I'm like, oh, they're on this. And they're like, oh yeah, and then they use some other name for it, and I'm like, oh no, they're not on that. Well, no, those are the same thing, and you just feel stupid, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh great, that's super easy. You give us a name, we'll look up the other one, we'll put them both on the screen so you can see them side by side, so you know exactly what it is. And while we were doing that, I was like, well, it would probably be handy to know if there's any side effects of this new medication with any of the other ones that you might have. Yeah. Great, we should probably just load that in. Then no one asked for that. And if someone said this thing is super useless, great, I'll totally take it out. But it's hard to imagine it not being useful. the flip side of that is, a lawyer would be like, hey, that sounds like medical advice. You shouldn't tell people side effects. And I was like, listen, enough, right? Like we also have to take a stand that we're trying to help people, and that's factual. It's not like a medical advice that there's a side effect between these two medications. But that's the approach of like building out the product, is that we can see obvious enhancements because we live in a world of AI or whatever. Like if you take a photo note, don't make me write a title for it. Just get the AI to look at the photo and figure out what it is on its own, right? Yeah. Don't make me type out a title for my photo, my text note or any of these other things. Just read the text and make it up on your own, right? So, those kind of come for free, I guess, because in some sense we live, at the edge of what's happening right now. But in general, it's such a different mindset. I don't have all the answers, and so I'm very much listening. And that's why going back to those customer interviews all the time to be like, okay, hey, we're ready to build out this feature. What are all the things we need to know?
It's a really interesting perspective, because like being in the thick of being a caregiver, that sandwich that I finally totally recognize the sandwich generation. I don't think about things like that. I just know that my dad takes a medication for his blood pressure and for this and for that. But if you were to ask me what they were called, I would be like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But because you're not in it, you can take that, 180 perspective view and look and go, this could be helpful. This could be helpful. Because when you're in there, you don't get it. You're like, I just have to get it done, and I just have to figure it out and then move on. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting, and I'm sure lots of other founders run into that. Like, oh, I'm building this because I know there's a need for it. But then you're like, is there really a need for it? Or is it just something that you've identified you need? Right.
Yeah. One, and back even to that Salesforce example with Arlo, we didn't go to where they were, right? Like every salesperson is sitting in a CRM. If you don't know that, you're not paying attention to their job, like period, full stop, right? Yeah. And so we didn't go to where they are. And in Elderella, it's a completely different perspective again, right? I'm not going to ask you to enter everything into our calendar, because you don't need another calendar. You have one that has the stuff in it already. So just connect to that calendar. Let me pull in the care events. I'll use AI to be really smart about it, so it doesn't pull in care events. Yep. And vice versa. I'll put stuff back in your calendar that we automatically detect. Again, sanitized to just be like appointment for dad or whatever. And then the details are sitting inside Elderella, so that you don't get double booked. You don't do all those things, but it's like you got to go meet people where the data is. Yeah. And so, again, just really internalizing some of those hard lessons from Arlo.
Yeah.
So I've done 3 different customer interviews for 3 different startups that are doing AI writing tools. And the same question kind of comes up, like, what tools do you use now to help you become a better writer? Like, what are the things, what's in your toolkit? And every one of them I answer, I'm like, well, I read more books, because that's the only way you get better at writing. And they're like, no, what about like if AI could help you get better at writing? Do you have anything that ever comes up like within your calls where you kind of get those, it's like an answer you didn't expect? Cause like the shock on the people, like when I tell them, like, yeah, no, I wouldn't use this, right? Is that a weird question I should cut?
No. It's a great question. I think when I listen to the calls, the part that surprises me, honestly, is just how people are still standing. Like you can't like the human toll, like the toll on these people that they're carrying. It's crazy. And no one knows. Like that is the insane thing. Like maybe like 3 people in their entire lives probably know, right? And yet it is crazy. Like these people live on a level of anxiety that I didn't think was humanly possible. Like they're literally just waiting for something to fall over and break, because they've learned that anytime they feel like the things are in a good and steady place, it does break, and then they go back into chaos again. And so they're like, I can't even think like that. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, it's wild. And I love the openness of the people who do the interviews and stuff, but it's hard.
I found myself actually getting emotional when I did my call. And I was unexpected. I was like, we're 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes in the call. And I was like, this, and it started, and I'm not anywhere where you are in your caregiver journey. Like I'm at beginning part of it, I
Yeah.
guess. And it's how do you kind of then when you're doing them, when you hear that, like how do you, like obviously it affects you.
Yeah.
How do you kind of compartmentalize that
What
against the data, right? Because there's emotion and data in things.
Yeah, the hard part for me is like there are, there's capabilities of what technology is like it can do, right? And there are things that I know that I can't help with, right? Like there's nothing that we're going to build in Elderella that's going to reverse dementia. It's
Right.
just that's not our game, right? And so there are ones where it's just like even if you used Elderella, even if we did everything we possibly could to help you, I don't know how to help you. And I think that, Alex, is like, that's the harder one for me is just like we want to figure out a way to help everybody and more just coming to some form of acceptance of, unfortunately, you're outside of the bounds of the things that I can help with. I can help with these things, but like in terms of like actually tangibly changing your life, I don't know how much of an impact that'll have. So I think that's the hardest part I've had to work through is just we can't help everybody. Even though we want to.
So we've covered a lot of like what you wouldn't do again and like your lessons that you've learned. Are there things from Arlo that you would carry over to Elderella in the like either the process you used or the tool you used or the thought process you used that you would carry over to your next or new startup?
Yeah, great question, Alison. I think there's a lot of pieces that you would just automatically carry it over to Elderella in terms of speed, like moving really fast, being able to put something up that maybe isn't perfect, but then, getting feedback on it, watching usage, those types of things. Being able to have a really open and solid relationship with, the other people in the company and being able to talk through hard things and push each other and everything else, I think is also really important and really thankful for the relationship that Jackie and I have been able to develop in terms of having very kind of compartmentalized worlds to some extent right now, but being able to kind of both accept, hey, that took longer than we expected, but we also still need to move really quickly. I think the biggest part that we're doing, that worked well at Arlo, but also, trying to do more of at Elderella is just being out in the community, right? Just talking about what we're working on, why, how it works, how it doesn't work, what it does, those types of things. Because you end up finding value in conversations that, like, it's not like I'm talking to a caregiver. It's not like I'm talking to somebody. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, like, oh, yeah, sure, of course, insurance companies have this problem and they're thinking about it and they're trying to figure out how to reduce churn and challenges and claims from caregivers on burnout and all these other things. Like, that makes perfect sense. Wasn't really paying attention to it, but very cool. So I think just getting out there a little bit more and having just being in the community, being present, sharing, is opening us up to opportunities that we hadn't anticipated and did much the same in Arlo. I would take calls with just about anybody sometimes just to be like, I don't know where this is going to go, but hopefully somewhere useful.
That's awesome. I love that.
Well, listen, thank you again for joining us for your third time in the studio, and you're in the new studio.
That's awesome. I love the chairs in the new
Yeah.
studio.
Once again, Elderella is doing customer interviews. So if you are a caregiver in any part of the caregiver journey, we'll have the link in the show notes to sign up for a customer interview. They're really interested in speaking to as many people as possible to get as many different experiences to help them build a product that's going to help, hopefully, tens of thousands of caregivers out there, tens of thousands of caregivers, provide the care and avoid the burnout that comes from that kind of invisible role of being a caregiver.
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand and solve the world's problems, I would delete the caregiver sentence of, it's just easier if I do it myself.
Yeah, that's the tough one, right? It's that burden that you're wearing it and no one knows,
Exactly.
or carrying it and no one knows. Well, thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions about Communitech programs or services, of course, you can visit communitech.ca or connect with them on social media, on Instagram, X, and Facebook. I'm Alex Kinsella.
And I'm Allison Peel.
Thanks again for listening.
Thanks.